Okay, so I would like to, in this video, do something that I feel like isn't being done enough, and that is talk about the provisions that used to be in the Build Back Better agenda or framework, the social spending bill that's being talked about, and it is being talked about in an honest way. And I want to talk about the popularity of these provisions that have been stripped out of it and what happens as a result of it. So first of all, we know that this spending bill began as, or publicly began as, a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Of course, it got beat back down to holy hell, and it is what it is now. I think it's around 1.75 trillion or something of the sort. And many of the policies that were in it before are no longer there. I'm going to go through 4 specific policies here and give you guys the support on it. Then I want to talk about it. And before I do that, I just want to say, bear with me. My eyes are currently dilated, so reading isn't the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Obviously, this is from Political Polls. So lowering Medicare prescription drug prices. This is one of the provisions that was in the bill. Okay. Having Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices for Americans. Need I remind you, America is the only developed country that doesn't do this for their population. And it's we do this willingly. Okay. This is our decision to do this because the politicians are incredibly corrupt, and Big Pharma have bought them and they own them and they're their slaves and they do their bidding. Okay. Kyrsten Sinema, for instance, took a lot of money from Big Pharma, and she comes out and opposes lower drug prices for Americans. What the actual fuck? Now, as you can see here, support for that is 88%. You want to know why? Because who in their right mind willingly would like to pay higher drug prices? I have an answer for you. No one. Okay? The 12% that oppose, who knows who the fuck makes up that population? But the vast majority of the American people are in unison with it. And they're like, no, yeah, we should have to pay lower drug price. We shouldn't have to pay more in drug prices than every other country combined. And that's what it is. Public Citizen published a report that showed us that. And they showed us that these different pharmaceutical companies make the bulk of their profits in America because we're the only developed country they can price gouge the shit out of. Okay, so let's move on. And by the way, when people can't get their medicine to treat their condition, they die. Needless to say, Medicare coverage for dental, eye, and hearing. Support for that is 84%. So having Medicare cover hearing, dental, and vision, 84%. Look at that. They don't tell you this in mainstream media. All they say is, oh, it's a $3.5 trillion social spending bill. They don't tell you that that $3.5 trillion is the amount over the course of a decade. They don't tell you that that's like 2% of our annual GDP. They don't tell you that they've increased the military budget tunes of $25 billion most recently, and we just pulled out of Afghanistan. They don't tell you any of this stuff. They don't tell you how much we're throwing at the defense. They don't say any of this. Whether they say, oh, it's a expensive spending bill, and they just leave it at that. People don't know what's in the bill. They don't know what the bill is compiled of. But when you poll the people, not on whether or not they support the bill that they know nothing about, but whether or not they support these specific provisions, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Let's move on. Paid family and medical leave, another thing that was stripped out of the bill. Support 73%. Look at that. Paid family medical leave, as we know, it started out as 12 weeks, then it went down to 4 weeks, then it went down to 0. And we'll end this off with universal pre-K for children. It has the least amount of support at 67%. The least amount of support at 67%. Wow. And so, this really gets into a broader conversation about the Democrats and their biggest enemy. Their biggest enemy is, in fact, not the Republicans, but themselves. Because, you see, if you notice their language and what they do, they cater to the corporations. That's their main thing. But they also try to virtue signal and pretend to cater to the people as if they want good things for the people. And you can't do both of those things at the same time. They're diametrically opposed. The people are opposed. The people's interests are opposed to the interests of what the corporations want. The corporations are driven by profit. They don't want you to pay lower money for drug prices because Big Pharma isn't going to be able to pad their pockets with as much dough as they could if they were allowed to screw you, which they currently are. So they're not for that. They don't care who dies as a result of it, who struggles, who has to undergo these hardships and trials and tribulations. They don't care about any of that. All they care about is dollar signs, okay? And when you are captured by corporations, which how they are, and you do this weird virtue signaling thing, and you promise things, and then you renege, it creates animosity amongst the people. If you see the Republicans, first of all, the Republicans, at least in Congress in Washington, not the Republican voters, but the Republicans, they aren't for any of this stuff. You don't see them out going hard about Americans paying less money for lower drug prices because they're not for it. The entire Republican Party is bought and owned by corporations and the rich, right? So they're not for it. But the thing is about them is that they're smart enough to not talk about it. They're intelligent enough to go, okay, well, our economics are dog shit and the people don't support that. So we're just going to culture war grievance them to death and talk about critical race theory and a bunch of other shit that at the end of the day, isn't an immediate concern of the people. So we're just going to, completely avoid the economic debates and, what could actually help our constituents. And we're just going to beat away on culture war and trade that we're still not going to fix and, fearmonger about China and Russia and other shit. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But at least that strategy works for them. When it comes to the Democrats, they actually talk about these issues and then do nothing about them, as we've seen. But I wanted to bring this to you because this doesn't get talked about much. The provisions that are actually in the bill, universal community college, the child tax credits, the ones that I just read to you, higher taxes on the rich and corporations, all that stuff is incredibly popular. And if you want to win elections, if you want people to vote for you, then do what's popular, and they will. But there's a problem with that. They can't. Why? Because they're bought and owned by corporations, and they can't defy the will of their masters. And that's why these things happen. That's why you're not going to get lower drug prices. That's why you're not going to get Medicare covering hearing, dental, and vision. That's not why you're going to get a plethora of things. Is it sad? Yes. But that's the system that we have, and it needs to change.